prevention in America by and large is lacking. So a lot of these kids grow up in environments where drugs are bad, don't do them. You're going to jail, you're going to hell. But nobody talks about the fact that, hey, look, most of you kids are going to experiment with drugs. Some of you are going to go on to suffer from substance use disorders. And when you do, this is what it's going to look like. And it's okay to go get help sooner than later. You don't have to wait till you end up in the criminal justice system, stage 4 addiction, or even dead, God forbid. So, this is why it's so important that these communities, even through their tragedies, they find purpose.
Hello and welcome to The Sober Social, a podcast from the HOFFA Foundation and a show about how you can live your best life sober. I'm your host, Adam Stoltz, owner of Digital Consulting, LLC, a company focused on video marketing and content creation for your business, making your complex video projects simple. I'm joined today by my co-host for this adventure, Mr. Tom Herb, and he is the co-founder of the HOFFA Foundation. Tom.
Hey, Adam, how you doing, man? This is awesome. Of course, here we are launching our very first podcast with the HOFFA Foundation. And we've been talking about this now for quite some time. And, looking forward to certainly, right now, make an impact out there, communicating with the community and allowing this voice to be heard all throughout the area and all throughout the country. So thank you.
All right. Thank you, Tom. And thanks for HOFFA and for let me be a part of this little adventure. And of course, if you like what you see and hear today, please be sure to subscribe, like, share, leave a 5-star rating. You can also donate to HOFFA's cause right on their homepage at hoffafoundation.org. And they can't thank you enough in advance for your support. Our guest today, for 22 years, has been an advocate for recovery support services at the local, state, and national level. He's been recognized by the state of Virginia's General Assembly for his foundation, the McShin Foundation, as a pioneer of recovery. And for almost 40 years, it'll be 40 this August, has been sober himself. Please help us welcome to the show the president of the McShin Foundation, John Shinholser. John, thanks for being with us.
Oh, thank you so much, Adam and Tom, for inviting me on your inaugural podcast. I'm honored to be part of it. Thank you.
Of course, John. We couldn't think of anyone better because you obviously have quite a bit of experience in this area. And now we know who the McShin Foundation is, but for some of those listeners out there today that may not know, can you just give us a quick overview? What is the McShin Foundation? What do you all do?
Well, McShin is basically a recovery community organization, which is a group of people in recovery that formed an organization to provide services as well as content on what to do, where to go, how to get help. But we also have a recovery community center, 15,000 square foot recovery center, where we actually facilitate a recovery program, a very intensive program. And we also facilitate sober living recovery residents. We have 135 recovery resident beds. And of course, we do advocacy, policy, influence, stigma reduction, as well as we're national as far as helping other communities, develop recovery community organizations. And we're very involved with criminal justice, not only reform, but the actual programming that takes place inside of correctional facilities for those suffering from substance use disorders. So we do quite a bit. So it's hard. That's the 2-minute elevator, what we do. So
yeah, that works. And that's a good overview for everyone. And it's you and your wife that started this. Is that correct?
That's correct. We both co-founded it. We got the bright idea at a 12-step fellowship camp out one Saturday night back in 2004. And that Monday morning, we were at a lawyer's office starting our foundation. So
great. Is it safe to ask you? So what was it during that trip, or what moment was it that made you start the McShin Foundation? What was the driving factor behind that?
Well, I think, having knowledge of, getting clean and sober back in 82, understanding that the stigma wasn't that great, and then witness, on the sideline what the drug war done to America and the treatment of addiction and substance use disorders. And just the way that, this illness was fully re-stigmatized by, the 1990s and 2000, and they just lock them up attitude, and recovering people were, it's a shame-based illness according to, the masses. So, we just knew that if people in recovery don't do something, if we don't go out there and make the change we think there ought to be, it won't never happen. So we were really inspired by spiritual divine intervention, you might say. And it just, and a lot's changed since like Tom came along and HOFFA come along. A lot of change in the last 20 years or so. The pendulum kind of swung back the other way, a little more recovery friendly, reducing stigma, but it's a daily battle. If people in recovery don't constantly be entering this space, being that change they want to see, our gains go away, because that's the way our history is operated. William White wrote a great book, Slaying the Dragon. It gives a history of addiction in America for the last 250, 300 years. And it's like a roller coaster ride with not only stigma, but the way we treat substance use disorders. So, we're hands-on recovering people, you might say.
Good. So I know that we had a couple of things we wanted to talk about, and I think the most important, and Tom, jump in here at any point, but and obviously you guys are doing a good job of this. How do we reduce stigma, most importantly in our local communities?
Well, Tom, one thing I like about Tom and HOFFA is they had a tragic episode in their family, but they saw that need to do something locally. And that's exactly how we're going to dial back the impact addiction's having in our communities. Those local efforts, people like Tom, HOFFA, the new sober house he's opening up. And I think Tom, I would bet money his family has gone through a healing process, honoring his brother, as well as they really got really involved in doing the things they're doing. But Tom, when you talk about what you're doing locally, that is exactly what's happening, what we need more of nationwide. So Tom, tell us your experience with that.
Yeah, thank you, John. And I got to say, there's just listening to you talk about all the things that you and Carol and your entire team have done, over a period of time is just amazing. And we couldn't think, John, of anyone better to have on our very first podcast episode than you. We talked about this as a team, as a board, HOFFA, and without hesitation, we knew that you had to be the one, because you've helped us out. You've got us to this point. I was sharing with Adam before we started going earlier today, like, if it wasn't for some of your guidance and mentorship and just being a sounding board to listen to what we were trying to accomplish here, and we're at the beginning stages here in Maryland, out in Central Maryland, I said we probably wouldn't be this far along, John. So I just wanted to thank you on this first podcast for helping us out. A couple of phone calls, of course, down at your house, and you came up to our event last spring, our first annual golf tournament. So just thank you for being someone that's always willing to pick up the phone or answer the phone when we reach out and be our guide. And so to John's point, our organization, HOFFA, which stands for Healing Opportunity Free from Addiction, did start not too long after my younger brother, Jimmy, passed away on August 18th, 2019. And, a lot of folks say, how did you get going? What did you do? And of course, it was one of those things where there wasn't any type of plan. Frankly, it wasn't really well thought out in the beginning, meaning the start of this whole thing started when, I know this kind of sounds a little odd to some, but when we had to cremate my brother, my parents' son, and I had to go through that process, being that my family owns funeral homes here in Maryland. And so if you could imagine your brother's services being in your house. I mean, he was right next door to where we have dinner, the other rooms in the residential area, he's in his casket. And so that final moment with him before we said our goodbyes, I had a cup of coffee in hand, and with my brother and family, we love, having breakfast together and coffee. If coffee brings people together, right? And so we actually put an empty mug in his casket on his hands. And as we're saying goodbyes, that was really the last moment. So, a few weeks went by and we're all in grief, and we're still in grief today, and we're working through it. The HOFFA Foundation has helped us, certainly push through the grief in the beginning. And so went to work right away on coffee. And the thought was initially, I need to do something that's going to keep my brother's spirit alive every single day for the rest of my life. What can we do to keep Jimmy front and center every day? And so went to work on HOFFA beans, coffee, and a few months had gone by after his passing, and we launched HOFFAbeans.org. And we said all the proceeds from the sale of this coffee is going to go to local organizations out there fighting addiction every single day. We weren't even thinking about our own foundation. We were thinking just coffee brings people together. It's the mission. It's the message. Let's go help. Well, a few months went by, and 2,000 pounds of coffee later, 25 different states. We saw bags in Alaska in the snow. We saw bags in Hawaii, all over the place. In the very beginning, people got behind the mission right away and what we're looking to do and what we are doing. And one thing led to another. And before you know it, we're gathering people in our community that see addiction through different lenses. So whether there are folks that have experienced loss, like myself and my mother and father and sister, there are folks in recovery on our team, on our board. There are people that have kids in recovery. And so it's important to us to see addiction from through a variety of lenses. And when we all came together, again, in the beginning, we talked about what type of impact do we really want to make out there in the community? And right away, we all knew that recovery housing, sober living homes in our area and everywhere, it's a big need. And thankfully, we have people on the board that have experience, but folks on the board like Melissa were able to connect us to John and go on this journey. And so again, we're still new. However, we know that we are making impact every single day. We got the sleeves rolled up. And like my mother says, we're not busy. We are occupied with a purpose every single day. So here we are. And I will say one thing is that, when you look at HOFFA, which is an acronym, the O stands for opportunity, as I mentioned earlier. And our goal as we continue to provide sober living houses and provide that care for those that are in recovery, we also want to provide opportunity. And get folks back on their feet, productive members of society, provide, whether it be tied to the coffee. We're getting ready to launch a coffee truck as well, a food truck. And there's all different types of things on the horizon. But at the end of the day, most importantly, is making sure that we've got people that have the care that they need, roof over their head, food on the plate, structure, no doubt about it. And as you can tell, I'm very passionate about it, John. So thank you for sharing that with me, because we got a lot going on.
Yeah, but you exemplified the need to, this not only destigmatizes substance use disorders, but it makes it okay to recognize substance use disorders and seek out help, because, prevention in America by and large is lacking. So a lot of these kids grow up in environments where drugs are bad, don't do them, you're going to jail, you're going to hell. But nobody talks about the fact that, hey, look, most of you kids are going to experiment with drugs. Some of you are going to go on to suffer from substance use disorders. And when you do, this is what it's going to look like. And it's okay to go get help sooner than later. You don't have to wait till you end up in the criminal justice system, stage 4 addiction, or even dead, God forbid. So, this is why it's so important that these communities, even through their tragedies, they find purpose. And you just nailed it, Tom. Your family now has purpose. And your purpose is to carry that message of hope that when people do suffer from substance use disorders, it's okay to get help. There's good help out there. Now, it's a fatal, incurable illness, and a lot of people are going to die. Addiction is not going to go anywhere. Okay. Our drug war is not the solution. 300 years of history in America, by now we should know what works and what doesn't work. But what really works is when the community, the people, they make it okay to get help. And then the help needs to be there when they seeking help or asking for help. That's why your sober home is so important. And that's why I'm so honored to be, part of your think tank, as you might say, because I love your mission. And I like the fact you're in a bit of a rural area and there's not a lot of services out there. And I like the price point, it's affordable for families. So, town by town, city by city, municipality by municipality, this is how we're not going to get rid of the drug supply. We got to work on the demand side. And that's where recovery comes in and recovery support services come in. And Adam, you asked a question earlier, why did we start it? We didn't have capacity in America. Our communities do not have capacity for the need that should be coming, seeking that capacity instead of waiting until it's catastrophic proportions of their addiction. So, there's a lot of moving parts here.
Well, and as far as that overcoming that, so people reach out sooner, because and correct me if I'm wrong, you two, but from what I see is typically most people don't bother to learn more about this cause until it affects them directly, and because of that, and because I also think the other part of this equation too is, you know, I think needs to be a lot more empathy and compassion, not just for people that need this type of assistance, but in all facets of life. How do you see, how do you get through people's minds that may not have had the loss of a loved one and may not have, may not experience this firsthand? How do we get those people interested to understand that the mind shift that needs to happen to help the individuals that do need the help?
Well, Tom, you went through it with your brother, did you not? I mean, what was your experience with that?
Yeah, so it's interesting. What Adam's describing was me up until Jimmy passed away. Meaning, it's one of those things where until it really rocks you to the core, you see it, but you don't immerse yourself in it, and really understand and get the education that we all need, because it's evident that in the community, our community, the stigma is real. The stigma is all around us, whether it's the public stigma. There's a lot of self stigma. There's stigma by association. You look at different types of stigma. And so, that hit me, John, like no other. And, I thought to myself, I was in a large company for almost 14 years, and I never brought up, really the mental health and the things that we go through and addiction in the workplace. And shame on me, because, it's one of those thoughts that crosses your mind where you think to yourself, wow, if I start to really vocalize this and start to get out there and bring it to the forefront, could that perhaps hinder my opportunity to do something better in this company? And that's a real thought, right?
Yeah, well, there's 25 million Americans on any given day probably need treatment for substance use disorders. Probably 10% of them will actually get help. 90% are running the other way. And they're doing that because this illness is not treated. It's a mental illness that's not treated like other illnesses. We teach, like women, for example, you test for breast cancer. We primary care physicians test for diabetes and other high blood pressure. And when you test positive for diabetes or high blood pressure, you listen to the doctor and you get medication. That's because we've normalized these other illnesses over the last 50 to 100 years. We have not normalized mental illnesses, especially substance use disorders. So even as we test for it, which is very little, but hopefully there'll be more testing for this, more prevention for this. And then when people realize that, hey, I tested for potential substance use disorder, I need to go find out what time of day it is. But we're not teaching our people this. We're teaching the complete opposite, that, oh my God, if you have a problem, you're one of those people, or you'll never be right. And the shame is just piled on from infancy all the way up through the teen years and early adult years. And you're living proof, Tom, just by the way your mindset used to be, but you know better now. And this is where we're losing our loved ones. Our loved ones, we need to start teaching our society that, look, let's test for substance use disorders. Let's appropriately deal with it when they test, positive for it, or so forth and so on. You see where I'm going with this?
Absolutely. No doubt. It's, I have a 15-year-old daughter, John, and, freshman in high school, and her and I've had multiple conversations, and it perhaps starts sooner than that, but it's so important to inject these conversations, to have the conversation, to bring it to the forefront, to let them know it's okay, right? To have the discussion, and certainly have the same conversation with their peers as well, each and every day. And so, my thought on that was, up until Jimmy passed, I almost kind of just walked the path of, it's not me, I'm okay, we're okay, right? And had like kind of one foot in, so to speak. Now it's, sleeves rolled up, both feet in. But I'll tell you, it's, Jimmy's, he's been gone for, 2.5 years now. It's like going to school. It requires, daily, weekly, monthly education and knowledge around all these things to really understand what's going on, and what really upsets me is when I see community conversations where folks that look at it through their lens, that aren't educated on the situation, that haven't immersed themselves into these types of topics, and still carry that stigma all around them. I want to figure out how do we unlock that combination? I guess is my question. Like, how do we unlock the combination to where, we got more people, like Adam said, that don't have to go through this moment, right, for them to get involved and take action. It's so important.
We have a 20-year stigma reduction campaign in front of us, and that's only if it doesn't get unhinged by the enemy, the adversaries to this. We have a yin and yang in America right now, but you can hang out, you can go out to eat dinner with a group of people at work, and somebody, isn't going to put salt on their food. They'll talk about, yeah, I got high blood pressure, I can't put salt on this. And somebody else won't be eating desserts. Yeah, I got diabetes. But the drink and the beers come around. Oh, yeah, I'm allergic to alcohol. I break out in handcuffs and probation officers and whatnot. We have got to, that I can't talk about stigma enough, Tom. I mean, it's so critical. That's an area where we have yet to touch the tip of the iceberg in. And you got 3/4 of our country, by what they see on TV, every time you see addiction, alcoholism, it's always the worst case scenario. Those 25 million Americans that meet the clinical criteria for inpatient treatment, 20 million of those folks probably got full-time jobs. You see them at church, in the grocery store, in the real world, and they're walking around ticking time bombs. Yes, the bottom 5 million, the ones I come in touch with on a regular basis that are in catastrophic periods of their life, they're in criminal justice system, they're broken people. That's one section of the mental illness, substance use disorders. And there's another 50 million Americans on top of this that are teetering on the edge of catastrophe by just abusing a substance. Now, here's the good news, though, is at least 20 million of us in recovery. And just imagine if a lot of us, half of those people were out there reducing the stigma, we could get this done in the next 20 years, get this mental illness where it needs to be in people's minds and brains, and get the appropriate messaging out there. Harm reduction, prevention, treatment, recovery, get everybody lined up. And it will be a whole different society 20, 30 years from now. It won't be what we got going on today. But like I said, addiction is not going anywhere, so we got a lot of work to do.
Yeah,
no doubt. To your point, John, I mean, creating that what I call groundswell or momentum, in my view, again, in my young view around this in the last couple of years, what I see out there is an opportunity around sober living homes, recovery houses, the ones that run the organization, the operators really coming together in the local areas and locking arms and creating bigger impact. This isn't a situation where we should be operating in silos or separate from each other. I think the synergy, connecting with one another and addressing it on a bigger scale is a big opportunity. And I'd love to see the day when we see more of that out there.
Absolutely. Adam, you look like you had a question earlier.
Well, I was just going to see what you guys thought as far as, because, once the addiction's taken hold, that's one part of the process. And we've mentioned mental health a lot. I know one thing for me that it took me to realize is why I was using. And that was because of some sadness and mental health issues that I hadn't dealt with, again, because of the stigma around even mental health, let alone addiction. I mean, do you find that dealing with the mental holdups that you all had gone through, did you find that as a reason as to why you were using as well, and why you allowed these substances to eventually kind of take hold?
Well, we don't have enough time on this show for me to get into why I started using, how I ended up the way I ended up. But there's so many mitigating factors why people end up with substance use disorders. But there's a thing called an ACEs test score. People can Google ACEs, and it's early childhood incidences that happen in your life, or what kind of home you come from, broken home, single parent, addiction in your family, poverty. There's a lot of things. So there are test scores, and the evidence will show, and trauma is a big thing. Most recovering people, or people need recovery, they sort of had some childhood traumas. And that's going on today as we speak. Little kids right now, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years old, they're growing up in environments, they're being traumatized, they're not getting, their needs met as a human child goes. When we were kids, like Tom or Adam, I would bet money when you were 6 years old, did your parents sit you down and say, okay, we're going to have a feelings workshop today, and you're going to share with us, what are you feeling? Are you mad, bad, glad, sad, and afraid? And why are you feeling these things? And what can we do about them? We weren't raised to identify our feelings.
Yep.
And a lot of families, they don't want their kids to identify their feelings. They don't know it, but they really don't, because it's going to put more pressure on them as parents to have to deal with these kids not feeling the way they're feeling. So that is a rabbit hole. I mean, social workers get down in that rabbit hole. You could have a 7-day, 24-hour workshop on this stuff. But a lot of what most people with the mental illness, substance use disorders are going to be diagnosed. You can trace it back before they're 21 years old. They can identify it. Not many people, if they lived a regular life, not many folks over the age of 21 are going to come down with a substance use disorder. It does happen. There is a percent, but it's a single-digit percent. Now, that's with the exception of Centurion problems such as Purdue Farming and the OxyContin epidemic. That reached a whole new level of addiction when our society gets it wrong on particular substances, and it can hit a class of people that normally wouldn't have gotten addicted. So there are periods in our history and civilization where you had an abundance of addiction that come out of nowhere, so to speak. But it's childhood environmentally related, most of it.
And have you found over the years that once you get people to deal with those traumas and issues, do you find that's kind of when the recovery can start, or is it, you think it's even a bigger process than that?
Well, the different recovery models, and like when I got clean and sober in 1982, I was in the Marine Corps. I was in an infantry battalion. I was deployable. I deployed, 5 months clean. I went on a third deployment. On one hand, I'm really glad I was in the Marine Corps, because I had the threat of a bad conduct discharge and going to the brig. And I like my freedom personally. I like good food and real women. So I avoided a correctional environment. And, but I had a job, I had a place to be. My first 16 months was the last 4 years of my 4-year enlistment. So it was real simple for me, stay out of trouble, chase these meetings, go to my therapy groups that they ordered me to. And it kept it simple for me. But it is so difficult to get people to stay grounded or find a pathway in recovery and stay focused and stay with it until they lose that desire to use drugs. And in a recovery process, there's always a new way to live that replaces the old way to live. So, and there's a waiting period for that. It takes about 2, 3, 4 years to change your brain chemistry and thinking and get to a normal thinking pattern, a safe thinking pattern, because that's why it's such a high relapse in illness. Most people, they're going to relapse off and on for 5, 10 years until they get a year clean or sober. Most people, it's hard to find people that can get that recovery experience and stay put for the rest of their life. I think 3% of the people stay clean and sober from their first introduction to recovery. 97% of people are going to relapse, and many of those are going to be multiple relapses over a period of years. And it's just like any illness, doctors don't give up on their high blood pressure patients or their diabetic patients or their bad heart people. You don't go to the hospital after 6 times having a heart attack, and the admitting nurse says, nope, you've been here 6 times. We're not taking you no more. They keep taking you, keep helping you. And that's where we need to go with mental illnesses and substance use disorders.
John, you mentioned something, the old life and the new life. And, when Adam and I were conversating around this podcast and putting these microphones in front of us and being a voice out there, living your best life sober, today is 410 days for me since I had my last drink. Sitting there on a private beach where we have some of Jimmy's ashes next to an osprey nest, looking up, had a half a cup of Bloody Mary and poured it out on New Year's Day into the sand. And that was the last time I had a drink. 400. But what I've found in this new life that's full of clarity and just genuine, authentic relationships, and it's a beautiful thing, right? However, it's very difficult. Everything from people that I once used to associate with, that there's always alcohol and other things around. Going to events. I mean, every event seems like it has to have some sort of alcohol, whether it be birthday party, some sort of shower, an event, you name it, right? It's abnormal. It feels abnormal to not drink.
That ain't never going nowhere either. To this day, I'm surrounded by substance uses, whether it be legal or people I work with, the newcomers. And, but I will tell you this, Tom, it gets better and it gets easier as time goes by, because then you realize, I like to give a lecture. You're not going to get so drunk or so high, you know what I mean? But in recovery, there's no limit to how you can get in recovery. And that's the purpose, I talk about. We got to lose that desire, find a new way to live. And the new way to live is our newfound purpose. You probably got it easier than a lot of people because you have purpose, Tom. I mean, my God, you got the HOFFA Foundation, you got the Sober Home, and you're on a mission. You got your family on board. You really got it better than most people. So you're one of the fortunate ones.
Thank you, John. Yeah, for me, it's like an idle mind. For anyone, really, that idle mind is never a good thing. And so, being able to occupy that time with doing something that has purpose behind it absolutely keeps me away from what it used to be like 411 days ago.
Yeah. Now I will caution. Don't you have young children?
I do. I have a young daughter, 15.
Well, make sure you show up for your daughter's life too, and your wife's life. Don't become this workaholic and this newfound purpose and leave the kids and the wife behind. So
yeah, it's to that point, John. No doubt, it's a balance, right? We got to prioritize, and what I'd like to see, vision around this whole thing, going back to our conversation around impacting the youth. A daughter came to me and some other kids of board members. The thought is swirling around that, do we consider some sort of junior advisory council? And you and I talked about this when I was at your house that day over coffee, because I remember I was going to call it a junior board, and it's like, look, don't call it the board. And here's why: it's an advisory council, right? So, they are very, I would say my daughter and Jimmy's nieces and nephews are very guarded about this foundation for their uncle. But it's an opportunity, right? It's an opportunity to.
Well, that's how you're going to change the stigma. These young kids got to get their warrior spirit early in life and get up in these schools, man, and start recovery clubs, sober clubs in high school and elementary school. But that's an important area, and it's not going to be comfortable for these kids either, because they're going to get bullying, by this stuff. Your uncle was an addict; he got what he deserved. They're going to have to hear that stuff. But the reality is, if there's not a ripple down effect from the parents to the kids and into these schools, remember, we got to get the stigma going the other way. And people are watching you, and your neighbors are watching you, and a lot of them are supporting you, saying one thing when they're in front of you, but they're saying another thing, behind your back. But that's the nature of this process. So it's a journey, baby. It's a journey.
And is this? I was going to say real quick, is this how you two see? Because I know we wanted to talk about how do we impact the addiction epidemic. Do you see it lying with the young people? I mean, is that definitely the way forward? Getting the next generation to understand this stuff better than the one before it? Well,
I think we got a major problem right now with fentanyl in America. and the way these cartels are targeting first-time drug experimenting people, especially the high school kids, and they're making all these fake pills, and it's dangerous right now, But I think just teaching these kids about recovery and let them know the truth. Look, a lot of you are going to need this. We are not co-signing early drug use or early drinking or early tobacco. What we're saying is don't do it. But when and if you do, because 90% of kids are going to experiment with drugs and alcohol before they get out of high school. If you catch yourself wanting more and you see yourself going south, this is what you do at that point. You do not want to ruin your life. But I think tell kids the truth, don't just sugarcoat things. And the worst thing parents can say is not, anytime I get around a parent, it's not my kid, not my family. I know right then and there I'm dealing with a brick wall. And that is not a good place to be, because you don't know if it's going to be your kid. You don't know if your kid. And here's another thing. I love this part too. I've given discussions to 30 sets of parents before. This is a true story. And 90% of them say, well, my kid don't have a problem. My kids don't do drugs. And I said, all right, I'll give all y'all a free drug test and I'll test all your kids for free, right? Oh no, only 15% of the families put their hands up at that point in time. So by what they're saying and what their actions are, there's a big deficit in there. So I call parents on parent stuff, but the truth is they don't want to know. They want to put their head in the sand and just hope like hell it don't happen. That's what they're really saying. They really not sure. They more sure hoping than they are the reality of the situation.
Yeah, John, the whole fentanyl thing, like you said, it's everywhere. And I look at ways in which kids communicate. Again, looking at my daughter and when we text message each other, kids today are Snapchatting, right? Like Snapchat is the big thing. That's the way they communicate. They, share locations and can see where they're at in different geographies. They can, share pictures. That's their communication vehicle. And, I've heard stories out there of drug dealers that can sell those pills that look like Percocet that are 100% pure fentanyl on Snapchat, and a 15-year-old boy or girl, right, gets that, and next thing you know, they're dead.
And
right.
So they name it, they come up with whole new names and drugs and everything, but at the end of the day, they got fentanyl in it or something just as dangerous. So you're right. I wouldn't want to be a kid today with all these social media platforms and hell, man, I grew up in a time where, we would go 2-3 days before making a phone call sometimes. So it's a whole different world out there. But we need these kids involved. We need to tell them the truth.
So,
absolutely.
Yeah. Do you think that's why nonprofits are so important in all this? Because I guess who else other than nonprofits such as McShin and HOFFA? Who else is going to get this message out there?
Well, it's so important that more and more people who suffer like Tom's family suffered, and more people like me who've been blessed in recovery, that's how we're going to change the tide of the impact substance use disorders has on our nation. It's going to come from these grassroots startup organizations. Every community needs to have a dozen vibrant organizations. It depends on how big the community is. I'll give you an example. Richmond, Virginia, we're a metropolitan area of like 1.5 million people. We got over 1,000 sober beds in this community. We have 5 recovery community organizations. We had enough clout amongst the recovering people to actually go down to our state government and get some money from the COVID bailout money to help cover some of these people with substance use disorders in our sober houses. But we're rare. There's not many cities that have done that nationwide. Richmond is a recovery hub on the East Coast. If I was a parent with a troubled kid that couldn't get clean and sober and been to rehab a few times, I'd send them to Richmond and just hope for the best, because this is how you crank out results. It's a community thing. It takes a real village here, and every village needs that recovering community.
And John, did you see, he's talking about COVID, did you see an uptick when COVID started?
we saw the crystal ball when it first hit. We battened down the hatches and prepared for the onslaught of not only the overdoses, but hell, during COVID, our jails shut down. We were taking people that were supposed to go to jail. Treatment centers were closed down. We were taking people. We set up COVID houses, just for COVID folks and stuff. So, but we're rare. There's not probably not a dozen organizations nationwide at our size or capacity that did what we did and how we did it. And but yeah, we got the highest overdose death rates in the history of keeping records this past year. And a big percent of that was COVID, and the other big percent was fentanyl. You take them two things away, and we're probably where we're supposed to be, but we're way, way up on not only the overdose death, but the new folks going to be needing treatment and recovery because of COVID. Absolutely.
It's a John. The other point around that would be, earlier you mentioned the ticking time bomb. Those people, that 90%, right, that's out there right now, that won't go get the help, right? I mean, in the workplace every day, dealing with business leaders and primarily HR leaders in my line of work during the day, mental health is like at the top of the list for every organization, right, of their employees. I mean, people feel burnt out. People feel like, they're working like this, right? I mean, we're on this screen now doing this through Zoom. This is how people work now. They're stuck in these boxes. They're stuck at home. They've been doing this now for a couple of years. But where I'm going with this is that because of the mental health issue that I see in the workplace, coupled with the 90% that won't go get the help, I see that ticking time bomb fuse rapidly getting smaller and smaller. So it's like, we've got to take action and address it now and do what we can in our local communities, because it could become a bigger problem very quick.
Well, I want to also go back to Adam's question about these local communities and whatnot. Tom, you and your family, you have social groups, okay? And because of your tragedy and your purpose with the HOFFA and the recovery house, you were able to educate these whole new circles of people who would have never paid attention to what they read in the paper or what they saw on TV, or they didn't know anybody else that could bring them the real information, real news about substance use disorders, the recovery process, how real it is in our community and what we need to do. So that's why we need more folks like you in all these communities. When you get the bug, you go do it and see what happens, because you reach hundreds and hundreds of people, probably thousands now, that have a completely different outlook on substance use disorders. Now we got 300 something million people in America. So we need to educate a lot of people. And remember, we forget a lot of things. So a lot of times we got to re-educate people. So, because of the circles you run in, you're a vital and intricate piece of this puzzle on not only reducing stigma, but provide needed services, capacity, provisions for those needing it. But telling the truth to kids is a big piece. Yes, we need capacity for sober living. Yes, we need detox facilities. Yes, we need treatment. Yes, we need jails and prisons and jail programs. Yes, we need laws. But by God, we better start telling our kids the truth, man. And these neighbors that don't want to hear the truth, tell them the truth too. And the neighbors that want to keep their head in the sand, we can't make people do anything, but we can keep reminding them, maybe all y'all should drug test your kids. So not wondering or saying it ain't happening, but when you find out it does, then you can have a serious conversation with them.
Well,
Absolutely.
And speaking of education, John and Tom, let's educate some people right now. If we've talked about if people need to reach out. If someone's listening to this right now and realizes they need help, what are the steps that you suggest they take, especially if they're worried about the stigma and being quote unquote found out? What would you advise that person as to who to reach out to first, where to go to, what services to seek? How would you tell them to take that first step?
Well, I mean, if you know somebody, you go to somebody you know. If you don't know nobody, Google it. Google like if you might be strung out on fentanyl, right? And you need to get some medication within 4 hours, or you're going to be out in the community doing things to get a drug that might kill you. You got an emergency situation. You need to Google, detox, medication assisted treatment, Suboxone, something where you can get to quick and get engaged by a professional or a person in recovery and start your journey. If you're just somebody who think you're drinking too much or you're doing too much prescription medication, or then it's not such an emergency. So you might have a day or 2 or 3 days to find and do some research and call those 800 numbers, but find somebody in recovery if you can. I look up AA or NA in the phone book and go to a meeting and ask around. You'll get plenty of help. And Tom, I'm assuming you're set up to guide people and direct people.
Yeah, we are, John. Absolutely. And this topic is, this one's tough for me. The reason being is that when, we recognize that Jimmy had a problem, and we didn't understand the magnitude of it, towards the end. My mother, father, sister, brother, all of us wish we were more educated and knew where to go and where to start and what resources, to tap into, and so here we are. Certainly we can provide the help. We believe we have a good system in place. As soon as folks reach out to us, we take immediate action with that situation, with the resources we have on our team. But some of the things that people just don't know, that may be listening to this right now in the backyard. I mean, little things, whether it be the number 211, or even in Maryland here, you got the we got the Good Samaritan law, that's out there that some people have no clue about. So I think just, the education around that, starting at an early age and making sure that, you understand who your local resources are at all times is very important.
Well, Tom, and there's another thing real quick, since you brought it up about your family. So if somebody needs help themselves, that's one thing. But what if family members see a loved one and they know they need help? What would you say to the family members? What steps can they take? What should they do?
Take action. Like, don't assume, don't wait, don't overthink it, don't ignore it, right? Take action and get that person the help that they need. To John's point, finding someone that's in recovery themselves. There are plenty of local resources around us right now. Are they all in one place? Meaning, can you go to one website or one line to, get what you need? Perhaps it's not there yet, but there's plenty of things around us in the county, in the city, in the state, that we can absolutely access and get the help that's needed. So that's my thing. I to keep it simple, Adam, if you believe, if you see the signs, the indicators, whatever it may be, the moment you see it, right? Don't wait for a pattern to formulate. You have to take action.
If I were a family member, I always encourage family members to get educated, and you can go online, Google Family Anonymous, and they got thousands of Family Anonymous meetings. They're free, they're online, and get educated about the severity of substance use disorders in your family. And you get a lot of experience on what to do, how to do it, what not to do, where not to go. And you got Al-Anon out there, and Google. That's one good thing we got going for us nowadays. The best thing I've discovered outside of my wife has been Google. And man, you can get a lot of information out there on the internet.
Absolutely. So John, here we are. I know we're coming up on time shortly, and this again podcast, and it's the first one, so I'm sure when it's all said and done, there's probably some lessons learned. I mean, it's my first time doing this, right? And I'm doing this because I know that you've done this already. Getting the Herd is your podcast, and Richmond's top podcast out there. You all have a communication vehicle, Facebook Live and other ways to get people in there, to advocate, to share, and it's an amazing thing to see. And again, it's their very first step on this journey as well, in hopes that the neighbors, the other community members that may not comment or like some of the social media posts, but they're out there right now listening and watching and taking good notes, right? That's what we see as being the value with this thing, is just being the voice in the community that perhaps others aren't ready and prepared to do. So anyway, I wanted to share that because your podcast, man, is like really cool. And, more should plug in.
Yeah, I appreciate that. But I told you earlier, look, these things go by quick, and the next thing you know, you done talked an hour and it's like, oh my God, I got to start packing or something. But that's what's so cool about podcasts. There's thousands of them out there, and most of them are very engaging, and there's so much information to be getting from them. And, where do you go for help? Well, of course, I'd like to plug McShin. If you need to go somewhere, we're really easy to find. But we talk to anybody, anytime. We love to talk, and recovered people love to talk. And so, I'm excited for you, Tom. And I know you're going to do real well with this podcast. I know your recovery home is going to do really well. I love your HOFFA bags. I'm on my last bag now, so I'm going to probably re-up when we're down in Florida. I see that. Talk to you about the little capsules, that's going to be our brand at McShin, I think. And I love the way you created a funding stream and a funding flow before you created capacity to fund it with. And that doesn't happen very often. So that was stroke of genius, I would say. So I'm looking forward to hanging out with you and seeing where HOFFA goes from here. You got a golf day yet for your next tournament?
We do. Monday, May 23rd is the second annual HOFFA Classic. And I know that you'll be there, John, again, and like last year.
I love the course. Yeah, we're McShin doing their golf tournament again this year. I think it's May 19th. We're doing ours on a Thursday this year.
Where can people sign up? Where can people sign up for these two tournaments?
Well, McShin website, it'll all be up there eventually. I don't know. It might be on there now. We've already started Facebook, and on our Facebook page, save the date. You can sign up on that. But hey, Tom, these recovery golf tours, you got to admit, they're fun.
Absolutely. 100%. I mean, yours last year, John, was amazing. We'll be back down again this year, the HOFFA crew, plus more. Last year we had about 4 of us or so. We're going to be down there, probably maybe 2 or 3 foursomes deep. But yes, a lot of fun down there for sure. And then
how'd your first tournament do? That was the best first tournament I ever went to. But did you raise money in the end?
We did. The outcome was amazing. The sponsors, the people that got engaged, most of them are coming back this year. Almost all, and some of them, like leaving last year, John, walking out of the building, already said, hey, we're all in for next year too. And, I've got an aunt that does tournaments at that same golf course often. And she said the same thing. She was, for what you all put together in your first year, it sold out in less than 2 days, which was amazing. Right. And it's pretty much without it. HOFFAclassic.com is the website. Same thing. We have saved the date out there. You can't register yet for a foursome or do a sponsorship, but I would say that it's going to be same story. Once we do turn that thing on, it'll be sold out rather quickly. So
that's amazing. We just attract the recovery golfers. You know what I mean? We don't have the market a lot of people get. So I'm envious of the ability to rally good sponsors and do real well with it. But we always have fun. We always make a few bucks and get some scholarships. And I golf the same no matter where I play. But I do like to have fun. I do like to socialize. And I do like to be that hope about recovery and carry that message. So that's a good thing.
Well, and
absolutely.
Real quick, John, before we jump off here, speaking of wanting to be that hope, tell us just real quick about your annual Recovery Fest and barbecue cook-off.
Well, every fall we do a Kansas City Society State Championship cook-off barbecue. And we missed 2 years because of COVID, but we're doing it again this year. And it's going to be, we always do it the Saturday after Labor Day. And that's the same day that NASCAR is in Richmond. We're going up to a Ruherton, big old Ruherton club this year, huge area. We'll probably have 25, 30 KCBS cook teams. We're doing a backyard event. We're doing a restaurant tasting as well. And normally we get thousands of folks come out, get recovery resource providers from the area, and some national folks show up. So people can come to this event that don't know anything about recovery and get tons of resources, talk to lots of people, and have fun. And it's a family environment. We don't bring out beer trucks or anything. It's all good, clean fun. So it's usually, it's just an amazing event. And And what I like best about it is when we bring newcomers to it, new people in recovery, and they get to come to a big event that's all about recovery, to see their faces light up and they see where they can see they got a future in having fun without the use of drugs is a big hit. So a lot of that out there.
Good stuff. Well, we have about 5 minutes left here. So what I might ask is, Tom, your final thoughts on anybody out there that might need some help, but your words of advice for them, and then I'll let you kick it to John, and then I'll sign off for us.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. So, John, again, thank you, man. I appreciate you. We appreciate you for joining us on the very first one. No doubt about it, the folks that have been listening to this for the last 45, 50 minutes or so are certainly taking away a variety of things that they didn't know coming into it. And there will be people watching and listening to this that maybe haven't had any exposure yet to HOFFA or McShin that will open up their eyes. And we encourage them to go to your website and our website and plug into our social media channels and learn more about us and just educate ourselves, right? Most importantly. And so anyway, really appreciate you, man. I can't wait to see you tomorrow down south and get in some of that warmer weather and have some fun together. But thanks, man, from the bottom of my heart and my family to you. You're the man. Thank you, John.
Well, I'm just honored to be on your inaugural podcast. And I do want to remind the listeners, in case somebody's struggling with addiction, that look, you can stop using drugs, you can lose that desire, and you can find a new way to live. And the family member struggling with somebody, I'll tell you the same thing. There is hope that you can guide your loved one to appropriate care. And for the rest of the listeners that don't know much about addiction and they don't think it's affecting them much, look, we need you. So feel free to reach out to somebody and see how you can help make us a better community in this space. And to you, Tom, I feel nothing but, a bright future for HOFFA, for your recovery activities. And I'm just so glad we met. I'm glad Melissa hooked us up. And even to you, Adam, you seem to know what you're doing here on these podcasts, and I appreciate that. So good job, Adam. Thank you very much for having me on here.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, of course. And again, thanks, Tom, for trusting me with all of this. Yeah, we like to have some fun and, of course, help as many people as we can. And for all of you listening today, please be sure to subscribe and like and leave a 5-star rating. And most importantly, share, especially with loved ones and people you care about. Let's get as many people educated on this stuff as we can. Of course, you can donate right to HOFFA's cause at HOFFAFoundation.org. Thanks, Tom. Thanks, John. And we will see all of you next time on the Sober Social.